What's going on, Soul Tribe? And welcome to Alchemist Astrology. Justin here, and are you ready to get into those lunar shenanigans? Because you know what, this is kind of a busy one. We got Mars that's moving into Capricorn, we got the Sun that's moving into Capricorn. Yeah, a lot of energies. When I was just kind of looking over this thing, especially even around like the 19th. Yeah, that's going to be the kind of busiest pocket. That's going to be so a lot of energies culminating there. So yeah, we got a lot to work through this week, but. Before we get into that, if you're new here, again, my name is Justin, and one of the things that I do in this channel is just talk about the lunar shenanigans, which is the astrology of the moon, which what sign it's in, what phase it's in, when it happens to be going to void, of course, which is soon, and just to get a feel for the energies each week as the moon is moving through and having these conversations with the different celestial bodies, because the moon represents the people, we the people. So it's good to sync up with that moon. It keeps you grounded, keeps you knowing what's going on. It's really really helpful with that moon. Now, before we jump into that, if you want to support the work that I do further, down in the description box is a link for my Patreon page, and I got a couple tiers on there. One of them will get you access to the Lucky Day podcast, which is a monthly podcast which covers which I'm about to do a recording for that here soon, which is about the auspicious dates for each month for whatever endeavor that you're wanting to initiate. And the second tier is going to give you access to that plus a personalized transit report from me each month. So, and who doesn't want that? Next best thing to get a personal reading with me. So, that's also available for you. So, if that's something that you want to check out, definitely again to go down to that description box. But let's go ahead and get into this thing here. Switch over because I'm going to cover the week of December 16th through the 22nd, 2025. And let's go ahead and get into this thing here. Because on the 16th, we have the moon in Scorpio. Got the moon here, 25 degrees. The moon's waning. We're getting ready to wrap up this lunar cycle here, not too much longer. And with the moon's in an interesting position right now because we got, well, I guess in this, when I was talking about this, I kind of hyped that up a little bit. Mars is already in Capricorn, but it's still early. It's basically just entered. But you got the moon here that has a release reception with Mars, which is a nice little support here. Mars is not going to be that reception helps, where it's not going to be as malefic as it normally would, whereas like if this was happening at different signs, Mars is just like, oh, I don't know Sag like that, and just my Mars just goes to town. But here there's at least that reception there, which is really nice, and Mars is in its exaltation, so it's still Mars doing Mars thing, but there's more opportunities for it to be constructive. It's got a opposition coming from Jupiter, which is great for Mars. It's meant for Jupiter. But there's this moon's being overall, I think, supported pretty well while it's been in Scorpio. This has been an interesting pocket, I think, especially with Jupiter being here. Right now, we got that friend. That's the first aspect that's coming to completion there. The moon is going to be forming a trine with Big Papa. And Big Papa's retrograde right now. It's doing great because it's in its exaltation, which is nice. But yeah, just right now, when you got a celestial body retrograde, its significators can be delayed when you think about that. It's moving slower than it normally appears to in the sky. And so you think about how that would translate down here. It's just that beneficence of Jupiter, that relief from the good stuff, the relief from the bad stuff, I mean, and the abundance, that Jupiter promises. It's not that ever flowing faucet, like it normally would be in Cancer. And so that is kind of a bit of a trickiness. So I think the moon trine Jupiter's just doing what we do and working with what we got, and trying to be as resourceful as we can with what's available, looking for different avenues of things, finding ways to outsource. Sometimes I was just talking with someone about this. I think that when it comes to like that idea of accruing more and things, it's not always about the getting of more, but sometimes it's seeing where stuff is being allocated to, and then it's like where, ooh, that's, I don't particularly like where this is going out to. Okay, let me switch that up a little bit. Let me turn that in and put it towards this thing, get more of what I want, making those kind of small shifts to, really get the most out of the abundance. And I think that's really kind of nice here with the moon trine Saturn too, because, we got things that we're going to have to, time's still ticking with Saturn. There's obligations that's coming up, and, where that can be a downer, but that doesn't have to be. I think with Saturn, the constructing side of it, especially with all this water energy, can be that feeling, that sense of like, okay, yeah, there's this bit of heaviness that's coming through. We're going to be having a lot of the celestial bodies moving through that Capricorn energy here soon, but they're finishing up the squares. Even the Sun just had an exact square with Saturn. It's still kind of shaking that off. Venus is actually coming up on that conversation. The Moon's going to do it. Mercury's going to do it. So there's a lot of Saturn energy in the mix. There's a lot of that heaviness, that sense of that again, that like low energy, that's depression, those sort of Saturn, those restrictions and constrictions that Saturn can bring. But I think that there's something that it's with the trine, it can feel more surmountable. There could be a bit more ease with that. I feel like, okay, you know what, where yeah, I don't like this scenario. I don't like these constraints, but I gotta think about the long game, with Saturn. So I think that, all things kind of, yield to time. So, I think that it's just a matter of time before it does, the pendulum does shift in that other direction. So, and whatever that means for you and, wherever you're at in your journey there. So, the moon in Scorpio, can be a lot. I always kind of keep an eye on when planets are going through Scorpio because I got a majority of fixed placements, and it's a busy time. That's a busy time. So, this one be kind of pay attention to if if that's something that you got a lot of fixed places. That's Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus, or Leo. As the moon may be working a little more personally with you, or if you see people that are kind of on one, that might be what's going on there. Just like, oh, lunar shenanigans. No, 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 that must stink. So just something to kind of think about there. And then we get to the 17th. And at about 8:38 a.m., that's going to be Pacific time, the moon's going to move into Sagittarius. And, we're getting a new lay of the land. Because for a while there, the moon would be under these harsh aspects. It would be co-present with Mars and square with Saturn. But now that Mars has just moved out of Sagittarius, now this is a new field. We're feeling out here. It's going to come to Mercury first, and we're going to definitely get into that in a moment, which I think is appropriate. Because now the energy has changed. Things have shifted. And what does that mean for you in your life? Where is this? Because look at this, Sag is lit. There's a lot of Sagittarius that's active right now. That part of your chart is activated, and it's all going to come up to that Saturn. It's all going to have a conversation with Saturn. And I think that that's a good energy for the moon to be thinking about how it's going to move, where it's going to take its energy. Because Sagittarius is ruled by Big Papa, Jupiter, and it's the mutable fire sign. It's one of the diurnal signs, so it's active in nature. And this is cool too, because even though they don't have necessarily by aspect, the moon and Jupiter are in this sense of the reception, kind of mutual reception, being in each other's domiciles. So Jupiter being a Cancer, moon, and Sag. So there is that kind of connection there with Jupiter that's really nice, and it's co-present with Venus, which is cool. So that's a definite kind of helper there. I think that's something to kind of remember with these energies, how the benefics can try to bring us all together, even in these kind of like tumultuous times, and try to remember that sense of like, all right, how's my crew doing, how's my environment doing, how's my family doing, how can I get that stuff in order, how are we moving, how are we, and that could be too, when we're thinking about just in general. The moon, like I said, can represent a lot of things more than just like the body. And the moon was represented with like the cities, the home space. So you could be noticing like, okay, how do I notice the energies moving in my home, or how do I notice things changing in my city? Do the people seem more lively? Is there a lot more activity that's kind of going on there? And this would be one if you have, now we're shifting over to the mutable signs. That's Sagittarius, Pisces, Gemini, and Virgo. So maybe moon may be a little bit more active for you, but when we're thinking about things are changing all the time, and I think that the moon is I remember reading this text that likened the moon to the air, and how it's inconstant and varied and just like kind of just going to and fro, but there's still a consistency with the moon. I think that because it's like the moon doesn't go retrograde. It's not going to go back in its tracks. It's changing its phases, its light that it's receiving. Yeah, but it's doing that the same every year. It's well, more or less. Especially like how it's meeting up with the sun and things. But there is a rhythm to the moon, and I think that the more that we get into that rhythm and kind of feel this stuff out, feel this kind of stuff out there, especially when the moons and the different planetary bodies are changing, that helps you to just kind of prepare like, okay, yeah, the Sag part of my days are going to be active, and this is for everybody. This is not just a personal thing. This is everyone. As some people are relating to it easily, some people are relating to it a bit, a bit tougher. Just it just depends. This Sag has been a mixed bag for me this year. Personally, it's opposing my moon. All these Sag placements. Now that Mars is gone, that's better. I'm really kind of I've been counting. I'm counting the days. When I'm recording this, it's still a little early, but I'm counting the days where Mars gets the hell out of Sag, and it's just Venus comes through, kind of fixes that a little bit. So I'm working on it. I'm working on it, but that's something to just kind of think about, as you're coming into that. And that's perfect because then we get to the 18th here. The moon's getting closer to that new moon phase, but beforehand, we have the conjunction with Mercury. And Mercury deals with, especially how we're communicating, how we think, how the information is being transferred. Mercury deals with like commerce, and the moon too was associated with all three of the planets. I think that are really kind of closely tied in with like the kind of daily spendings and how like the market moves and things, like, and I know there's like a whole financial sector of astrology. I'm just more talking about the significators of the planets. Venus dealing with like the markets and things and the factories, the moon dealing with how we're spending versus kind of what we're receiving. Mercury is just being the rule of just like commerce and banking. There's a lot of things I think that are moving right now, and something that I wanted to, and actually no, I'll wait to kind of talk about that, but I think that when we're the moon's conjunct with Mercury, that could be a lot of conversation. That's a lot of lively conversation when we're talking about with Sagittarius. There's more fire, there's more energy behind the minds. I like with Sagittarius. It's a Jupiter ruled sign that definitely does give more of a positive spin to it. But there is still that square that's building up here with Venus. That Venus is now getting closer with almost within that 3-degree range. So there's a lot. Sun's still separating from that. So there's a lot I think that's building up. So I think that this energy is one to just be aware of how the conversation is moving, what maybe news that you hear that's coming, however you digest the news, things along those nature, whether it be just like the news in general or just like kind of the news with this like your family, your friends, things along those lines, wherever that Sagittarius portion of your chart is. But that is a more kind of like, I think this would be like it could be a good time, I think in general to do something with, maybe with some friends and things, because Venus is there, doing something with some people, maybe doing, considering they're all kind of under the beams, maybe doing some kind of like a little private thing, maybe hosting like a little house thing at your home or your apartment or whatever that's looking like, and just something with like a more kind of something new. I think even too with Sag, something that maybe you've been thinking about, but like whatever that might be looking like there. But I think that generally, I think that there's an enthusiasm with Sag. There's something that can be a bit jolly there. But I do think that again, it's a fire sign. It could be a little heated. So just with Saturn, I just being close in aspect there, I'd be just kind of mindful of that. And actually, we're gonna get ready to talk about it because here's the 19th, because this is where this is kind of the busiest point of the week. We have, before the moon enters into Sagittarius, first the moon's going to form a conjunction with Venus, and that's nice. This is something that we get once a month. That conjunction with the benefics, and the nice thing with Venus is that Venus wants things to be. Venus wants laughter. It wants that sense of joy, that sense of harmony and connection, that sense of beauty, devotion, cleanliness. There's this purity. There's a real there's an innocence to Venus that's really nice. I do think that there is, one thing I have been noticing with Venus, and I think that's something that I've noticed in like just like kind of like ancient readings is that Venus definitely has this kind of mixed quality where I remember reading something that Vedius put where it's like Venus rules both things appropriate and inappropriate, and it's like there is that sense of sexuality with Venus, they're not that's inappropriate, but there is that sense of that the desire and that idea of when that thing goes too far, when it becomes that sense of excess, and I think that what can happen with the moon squaring Saturn, Sometimes when we've been feeling in, I think what can happen when you've been feeling in that sense of restriction, when there's because Jupiter, or not Jupiter, Venus can give this sense of gifts and things. There's that giving that Venus is a benefic too, but I think sometimes when we do get that little bit, we can. If it's, especially if it's been a while since we've enjoyed ourselves, we can go a bit overboard for a fear of, oh, but because when is it going to be gone again? How that cycle goes, between that dance between the malefics and the benefics. And so there's something here about, like, one, I get like an energy of moderation, and we're really kind of wrapping up this again, this lunar cycle. This is process what's gone down for you this last little bit, so from the last from that moon in Scorpio, where we had that conjunction with Mercury there. It's been a lot that's been going on that period of time. A lot of intense energies, it seems like, emotions and things. And so now we're coming into, when we get to this new moon here, because that's what I have. If you're watching these videos, and if you've been watching up to this point, you've seen that I have the charts up here. And the new moon's going to happen at about 5:43 p.m. Pacific time. It's going to happen at 28 degrees and 24 minutes of Sagittarius. Now, when you look at this as, just as a chart, it's nice because Venus is there. It's pretty close that the Venus is applying within about 4 degrees. But they're just separating from Saturn, just within not even, almost about 3 degrees there. So it's nice that they're separating, but they're both getting ready to apply next to Mars. And we're gonna talk about that here next. So it's like, we get out of this lunar cycle, and then you're gonna go. We get back into where it's going to. We've kind of processed whatever, with that Saturn thing, whatever kind of like long-term maybe ramifications, or kind of long-term things that may have been kind of brewing up, maybe looking at any sort of hindrances, challenges, whatever that is. And now it's like there's this almost like this anticipation, like, oh man, things can't keep going like this, so I'm gonna have to move this way. I'm gonna have to make a certain move. I'm gonna have to make and with Mars and Capricorn, I guess we can go ahead and move into the next one there, because when we get into the 20th. Now the moon's waxing. Now the energy's, the light's building, Oh, and something I wanted to mention real quick. Let me backtrack actually before we move into that. One thing that's been very interesting, and that's going to be a big theme going in, from December into January, is that there's going to be a lot of these, the planets and the moon, at least at this moment, are all under the beams of the sun, and that's when they're within that 15-degree range of the sun, and that was usually translated as something as where there's this hidden energy that's happening. Now, when you have the cazimi, how that exacts, within like a degree of the sun, that was meant more so as a kind of like you were sitting on the throne with the sun, that you had a total access to the king, and whatever that you wanted, the significators of that planet. And so there's a lot that's going on here right now, though, because there were hidden things, that were thought. It was I remember reading in one of the election books that if you wanted to do something in secret, it was done during a new moon. And that was something that, that's something interesting there. Because when you think about it as an astronomical sense, you can't see these planets right now. You haven't been able to, Venus was like all August and like in July and things, man, Venus lit up that night. It was dope. And then, but once it moved under, you can't see Venus anymore. And we haven't been able to see. I remember seeing Mars back in like July. It was like back in early July. I think so. Yeah, so it's like it's interesting, to see how those disappear like that. And so there's something that's brewing up here. I'm not quite sure, this could be like maybe there are, maybe big plans in your city possibly. Maybe there's something that is, again, looking at the kind of the Sagittarius and then going into the Capricorn portions of your chart especially. There's something that's in the works that's happening here that's going to require some kind of work. And then we move back to the 20th. Because, then the moon's going to conjunct Mars. And this is interesting because Mars is in its exaltation here. The moon is in its detriment. The moon is not the most favorite place of the moon, since it's opposite its domicile. But again, it's got that reception with Saturn, which that definitely helps that out. It's opposed Jupiter, so that's at least something that's kind of coming. That's kind of coming through there. But Moon Mars things can still, on a less constructive scale, can be this sense of agitation. This could be like the people feeling unsettled, feeling like that there's just a lot of energy out right now, that there's just really kind of feeling busy, or just something, just something feels like, that someone's agitated or something like that, or just like seeing, those types of things, and it's interesting to notice that, to just kind of watch that and observe that, so that, just kind of, because this is something too, now the moon is talking with Mars in a new sign. It's been a couple years since Mars has been in Capricorn. And so now the moon's kind of reorienting itself to Mars in Capricorn again, understanding it now from, instead of it had all these hard aspect in mutable signs, now it's going to have hard aspects in cardinal signs. And that's something to pay attention to if you got a lot of Capricorn, Aries, Cancer, or Libra. Moon might be working more personally with you. But yeah, that's something to it's something to pay attention to, just where the energies are moving. What are the long-term plans? Because I do like Mars in Capricorn. It is a hard-working Mars, one will take the time and has the patience to get the thing done, that will, even in the face of adversity, will still rise up to the occasion. Will be able to take charge. This it gives me that sense of, the longer you do it, the more experience you get at it, and I think it's just like that thing that just through time. Very interesting energy with that one. And then you get into the 21st of December, and then the moon will form its opposition with Jupiter. And with this one, the opposition is a harder aspect, it's where, like I said, where they're in opposite signs here, and they were, like seen as Saturnian in nature, and so there could be this moon here, the people, not being pleased with what Jupiter is offering. Whatever the constellation prize to a normally direct Jupiter would be. Just it feels like that. It's just like almost like the sentence that I think about, just like settling for like second or something like that. I'm not quite sure what that, that feels more kind of intuitive there, but there's something. I think that sometimes with the moon opposed Jupiter, I think that again it's kind of like those hard aspects with the benefics can be like that, maybe taking something for granted. It could be that overspending, thinking that it's going to come back all the time, but that maybe business was a little slow this month, or whatever that may look like. So, and now that moon sextiling Saturn, and I have that up here on the chart, is making that adjustment that, there are some things that are changing, and there's some very obvious things that are changing, in it pays to kind of be alert, and I think to have those, and not in a way that's necessarily like panicking, but to get oriented, just like, okay, how is this affecting my friends, and how do they notice, or the people that are close to my life, my coworkers, my clients, or whatever that's looking like. And just like seeing how that's looking, where are the changes, and what are the resources that are available, and letting each other know that, like, hey, I got your back, like we're in this thing, that we can weather this storm, whatever that looks like, and now we got here, at this point the sun just entered into Capricorn, and again, happy birthday for you Capricorns. And actually, let me take a moment here, Cap. Happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday. It's your birthday. And you know what? If it's your birthday and you want to book a reading with me, you email me, because I have a discount code for you, because considering that it is your birthday season. So definitely check that out. Just a little something to mention there. Let's go back over here. Let's get that back over here. Look, a little bit of, take the abundance where we can. That's what Big Papa's offering here. So, but really though, I think that it is it's just assessing a matter of just like what are my resources that I'm working with, what are how are are there some possessions that I need to part ways with, are there some that I need to save up for, what does that kind of look like there, that kind of long-term planning. I think that's comes up in there. And then, the kind of nice thing here when we get into, I know it's like it's been a minute since we saw some green. I was a little, because just thinking about it, we get to the 22nd of December, and about 7:51 a.m. the moon is going to enter into Aquarius, and that's Pacific time. And this is, yes, it's under the rulership of Saturn, sure. And Saturn's the traditional ruler of Aquarius, but it's not being looked at by either of the benefic or of the malefics. So it's kind of out of that view there. So that's kind of nice, and it has this, at least this sign-based sextile that it has with Venus. So even there's a little bit of support from Venus that's trying to get into there, and that could even be, sometimes on Green Day is just like making the where things can feel just again more manageable. Where it's like it may not be the absolute furthest that we can go, at least it's some sort of progress, in some sort of way, and feeling of some semblance of control, because it's like when you get that, when we're thinking about Aquarius, they are they're ruled traditionally by Saturn, and they are the fixed air sign, and they are one of the diurnal signs, so they're active in nature. And again, there's that same kind of structure similar to Capricorn, that sort of thinking about what's the long game here? What is my plan? Thinking about that fixed air, holding that thought in and letting that thing crystallize. Writing down that, maybe putting it on some sort of to-do list. What do you want to get accomplished, maybe in going into next year and the next year, and now that we're in Capricorn season, that we're getting into, because the thing about this, the thing about this energy too, depending on where you're located in the world, the sun's been rising up here at like almost 8 o'clock in the morning. So it's just like, man, I've been barely wanting to get up. But now this is where the sun's, was at its darkest. But now it's going to every day start getting up earlier and earlier and earlier. And so there's going to be more light that's going to be coming, but then that's going to be vice versa for the other hemisphere. So that's something to think about, how that, maybe even kind of works that symbolically in your life. What does this kind of next chapter look like? The sun is actually, about to be, now that's in Capricorn, in about 14, 15 days, it'll be at 15 degrees of Capricorn, and that's, halfway through my this year for me, of my personal, kind of solar return. So, thinking about how's this chapter gone so far? Where have there been wins? Where do you want to be further along? And then so it's a good time, I think, for just that kind of general analysis. And again, since we're going to be moving to a lot of heavy kind of Capricorn energy here soon, I think that's good to get into that mindset early on, to just kind of like, okay, let's settle in here. Like I know this is going to be maybe a bit more. And it's not that Capricorn don't know how to have fun, but it is more of a, again, that's Saturnian energy. Again, that's a little bit more heavy, a little bit more austere, a little bit more, just more serious and more disciplined in things. And so, and I think that there's just a lot that's going to be happening. And the situation too. One last thing that I wanted to mention about this that kind of new moon with all those planets. With them having squared Saturn. Saturn is, I know Neptune gets a lot of that whole blurring, lines of things, but Saturn was about like concealment and secrets and the idea of being able to, it's almost like where you can't read somebody, like there's usually I've always found there's some kind of Saturn or some kind of Mars going on there for sure, but it's that, or that someone to be able to present off one thing and then meaning a whole other thing, this it's a hard to read situation, right now, and I think that's something to, clarity is key. I think and having multiple sources, to exchange information with, to make sure that things are, how accurate things are at, and where the, what's the baseline, where are the people at, and just so we know how to move and things like that. So, yeah, just as that makes sense for you. So, But yeah, that's the that's the energy this week. So hopefully found that useful there. But yeah, we're last just thinking about this past week. It's been like I said, I got a lot of these planets have been opposing my moon placement, especially by sign. And so, where Sagittarius is not a bad period for me. It is one where it's just a very active one, very very active one, and one where had learned even too, especially with Mars being there, to be careful, be careful with, and how closely the moon is associated with the body, and thinking about those even kind of aspects there, because I've been very very interesting. I got some very good notes from this moon in Sag, and I got got eyes on this. Things are going to get a little quiet for me, as energies move into Capricorn, which I'm kind of looking forward to. I kind of I want to shift the focus a little bit, and so that'll be kind of nice to have that kind of like ease up a little bit. So that's something that I'm kind of wandering for. But the week wasn't too bad. Week wasn't too bad. Where are we at right now? The moon is just now entering into. It's about to enter into Scorpio here soon. The moon, so we'll see about that. Moon in Libra's been active. I generally like Moon in Libras, but the energies have been a little low. I think that with that Mars aspect that still kind of was just kind of coming to completion there. I think that one you kind of noticed that there was that bit of drag in the energies there, that sort of like lack of motivation, at least with some of the people that I was having conversations with. So, but yeah, we're almost through the thick of it, at least, until the conjunctions. but but that's energies of the week. So, and if that's something where if you want to see how these are showing up more personally in your chart, again, down in the description box, there's a link to book a consultation with me, so definitely check that out. And if you have any questions about the services that I provide, my email is down there. And if you want to see what's going on for the month, and I'm actually going to, like I said, I'm going to probably get ready to do those here soon. If you want to look at the monthly transits and see what is coming up for you there, there's a tab for the Celestial News Monthly, and that just talks about where the sun and the other classical planets are transiting, what sign they're in, what zodiac signs are going to be most impacted, and how to most practically work with those energies. So that's available for you, and the playlist for the Lunar Shenanigans are also here. So if you even want to look back to see, periods of times and things like that, to kind of reflect to see like, oh, what was it like when the last time the moon was in this period of time? That's something that you can check out as well. And I think that's it for you. So until next time, stay mindful out there. You can't keep eyes on the moon right now. Well, almost. By the time the moon gets into Aquarius, it's out of from under the beams of the sun, so it'll be smiling at us a little bit, and I will catch you. Definitely, you know what? The moon's a lot easier to catch than Mercury. On the next one, hopefully here soon. Hopefully here soon for you too, but later.